I stared at my father's weathered face as he thrust a crumpled piece of paper into my trembling hands. The guest list contained 30 names written in his careful block letters. "Start cooking at 4 a.m." Dad ordered, his voice carrying that familiar tone that brooked no argument. "And make sure everything's perfect this time." The reference to last year's minor mishaps stung like a slap across my face. My tiny Chicago studio apartment suddenly felt even smaller as I imagined 30 hungry relatives crowding into my space expecting a feast I had no idea how to prepare. I forced my lips into a smile and said, "Of course." But at 2 a.m. I was at the airport instead, boarding a plane to Hawaii, while 30 hungry relatives would soon arrive to find an empty kitchen. 3 weeks earlier, my phone buzzed during a particularly stressful Monday morning at the marketing firm where I worked as a coordinator. The caller ID showed Mom, and I hesitated before answering, knowing that nothing good ever came from Sandra's calls during work hours. "Cheryl, darling, I have the most wonderful news," she announced before I could even say hello. Her voice carried that artificially sweet tone she used when she was about to dump something unpleasant on my lap. "What's going on, Mom?" I asked, switching my phone to speaker while trying to finish the campaign analysis that was due in 2 hours. "You're hosting Thanksgiving this year? Isn't that exciting? I've already told everyone in the family, and they're absolutely thrilled that you finally want to bring everyone together." My fingers froze over the keyboard. "Wait, what, Mom? I never agreed to host anything. I live in a studio apartment and I'm working 60-hour weeks on this major campaign launch. There's no way I can—" "Oh, don't be silly," she interrupted, her voice taking on that dismissive edge I knew so well. "You've been complaining about not seeing the family enough, so this is perfect. Besides, Jake was originally going to do it, but he's gotten so busy with that lovely new girlfriend of his. You know how important it is for him to focus on his relationship right now." I felt my stomach drop. My brother Jake lived in a spacious 4-bedroom house in the suburbs with a kitchen 3 times the size of my entire apartment. He had been planning this Thanksgiving for months, sending out save the dates and discussing menu ideas at every family gathering. "Mom, Jake has way more space than I do. His house actually makes sense for hosting 30 people. My place barely fits me and my furniture." "Cheryl Elizabeth." "I'm surprised at you," Sandra said, using my full name like I was still 12 years old. "When I told everyone that you were begging to host because you're feeling so lonely being single and all, they were just so touched by your enthusiasm. Uncle Harold even said how proud he was that you finally wanted to take on some family responsibility." The words hit me like ice water. "You told them I was begging to host and that I'm lonely." "Huh. Well, honey, you did mention feeling disconnected from the family at Easter. This seemed like the perfect solution to help you feel more involved. Everyone's been worried about you living alone in that little place with no boyfriend or anything." I closed my eyes, feeling the familiar weight of manipulation settling over my shoulders. My mother had a talent for twisting casual comments into elaborate narratives that served her purposes. At Easter, I had mentioned missing some family traditions, not begging to take on massive hosting duties. And Jake suddenly got busy. I pressed. "Well, you know how it is with new relationships. Jessica is such a sweet girl, and we don't want him to feel overwhelmed with too many obligations. He needs to focus on building that connection." The double standard was breathtaking. Jake's relationship deserved protection from family obligations, but my career and personal life were apparently disposable. I had been working on the most important campaign of my career, one that could determine my entire future at the company, but that meant nothing compared to Jake's dating life. "Mom, I really don't think this is going to work. My apartment is tiny, I don't have the right equipment for cooking for 30 people, and my schedule is completely insane right now." "Oh, stop making excuses." She snapped her fake sweetness, finally cracking. It's one day, Cheryl. One day to show your family that you care about them. After everything we've done for you, I think you can manage to cook a simple meal. A simple meal for 30 people with dietary restrictions and special needs. Don't be dramatic. Just make a turkey and some sides. How hard can it be? I raised you better than to be this selfish. And there it was. The guilt trip that had controlled my decisions for 28 years. The suggestion that any resistance to unreasonable demands made me selfish and ungrateful. I felt my resolve crumbling under the weight of familiar shame. I just don't understand why Jake gets a free pass while I... Don't disappoint the family again, Cheryl, she said coldly. We'll talk about the details later. The line went dead, leaving me staring at my phone in the quiet office. Around me, my colleagues continued working on their projects, blissfully unaware that my life had just been hijacked by family obligations I never agreed to take on. I looked around my tiny studio apartment that evening, trying to imagine 30 people fitting inside the space. My kitchen consisted of 4 linear feet of counter space, a half-size refrigerator, and a stove with 2 working burners. The main room could barely accommodate my couch desk and dining table that seated 4 people if they sat very close together. But what hurt most was the realization that my parents had painted me as desperately lonely and eager for family connection. They had turned my independence into something pathetic, my career success into evidence of social failure. Jake got respect for his choices while I got pity disguised as opportunity. I sank onto my couch, understanding that I had been set up to fail from the beginning. This was never about family tradition or bringing everyone together. This was about putting me in my place, reminding me that no matter what I achieved professionally, I would always be the unmarried daughter who needed to prove her worth through domestic service. The guest list would arrive soon, I knew, along with a cascade of additional requirements and expectations that no reasonable person could fulfill. But for tonight, I just sat in the growing darkness of my apartment, feeling the familiar ache of never being quite good enough for the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. The email arrived on Thursday morning with the subject line, "Thanksgiving details, important." In all capital letters, a sure sign that my mother had compiled another one of her infamous lists. I opened it while sitting at my desk, coffee growing cold, as I scrolled through what appeared to be a catering contract rather than a family dinner plan. The guest list contained 32 names, not the original 30 with detailed notes about each person's dietary requirements, seating preferences, and personal quirks. Uncle Harold needed diabetic-friendly options with no sugar artificial sweeteners or high-carb vegetables. Aunt Patricia demanded completely gluten-free preparation areas to avoid cross-contamination due to her celiac disease. Cousin Emma had recently gone vegan and required separate cookware for all her dishes. Great Aunt Rose, now 87, could only eat soft foods that wouldn't irritate her sensitive dentures. But the real shock came halfway down the list, where I found a name that made my blood freeze. Derek Matthews, followed by, plus guest, fiancée Jessica bringing homemade pies. Derek. My ex-boyfriend, who had cheated on me 2 years ago with his coworker, then spread rumors throughout our social circle that I was emotionally unstable and clingy after our breakup. Derek, who had systematically destroyed my confidence and reputation before disappearing from my life completely. I grabbed my phone and called my mother immediately. "Oh, you got the list, wonderful," Sandra answered cheerfully. "Why is Derek on this list?" Derek Matthews. "Well, he's practically family, honey. He dated you for 2 years, and his father and your father still play golf together every weekend. Plus, his new fiancée seems absolutely lovely. She's bringing homemade pies, which is so thoughtful." My hands started shaking. Mom, Derek cheated on me. He spread lies about me to everyone we knew. Why would you invite him to my Thanksgiving dinner? Oh, Cheryl, that was so long ago. Water under the bridge. Besides, you need to learn to move on from these old grudges. It's not healthy to hold on to resentment. It's not resentment, it's basic self-respect. Well, I already told him you were excited to see him and catch up. He mentioned how proud he is of your career success. See, you're making this into something bigger than it needs to be. I felt the room spinning around me. My mother had told my ex-boyfriend that I was excited to see him. The same man who had systematically humiliated me was now being presented as a welcome guest at my own dinner party. And Jessica is bringing pies. Yes, she makes them from scratch. Isn't that nice? She even asked what your favorite flavors were so she could make something special. The implication was crystal clear. Derek's new fiancé was domestic and thoughtful, making homemade desserts, while I struggled to figure out how to cook a turkey. The comparison was deliberate and cruel. Mom, did you tell her I was making everything from scratch too? Well, of course. That's what hosting means, dear. You can't just buy things from the store and call it homemade. I scrolled back through the dietary requirements, my panic growing with each restriction. Diabetic-friendly, gluten-free vegan soft foods, plus regular options for everyone else. That meant I needed to prepare at least 5 different versions of every dish using separate cookware and preparation areas to avoid cross-contamination. Mom, when were you going to tell me about all these dietary restrictions? What dietary restrictions? Uncle Harold's diabetes, Aunt Patricia's celiac disease, Emma's veganism, Great Aunt Rose's soft food requirements. Oh, those little things you should have asked about details when you volunteered to host. A good hostess always checks with her guests about their needs. But I never volunteered. And these aren't little things. This requires completely separate meal preparation for different groups. Cheryl, stop being so dramatic. People managed to cook for families long before there were all these fancy dietary labels. Just make simple food that everyone can eat. There is no simple food that covers diabetic, gluten-free, vegan, and soft food requirements all at once. Then make multiple dishes. That's what hosting means. If you weren't prepared to do it properly, you shouldn't have offered. The circular logic was maddening. I hadn't offered anything, but now I was being blamed for not anticipating requirements that nobody had told me about until this moment. Mom, I need professional-grade equipment to pull this off safely. Cross-contamination with celiac disease can put Aunt Patricia in the hospital. Oh, you worry too much. Just wash the pans between dishes. That's not how celiac disease works, and I don't have enough pans to make 5 different versions of everything. Well, then buy more pans. This is important, Cheryl. The whole family is counting on you. After she hung up, I sat staring at my laptop screen doing quick math on the requirements. 5 different preparation tracks meant I needed 5 sets of cookware, 5 times the ingredients, 5 times the cooking space, and 5 times the expertise I didn't possess. I spent my lunch break researching celiac-safe cooking protocols and discovered that true gluten-free preparation required dedicated equipment that had never touched wheat products. My entire kitchen was contaminated by regular cooking. I would need to buy completely new pots, pans, cutting boards, and utensils just for Aunt Patricia's food. The vegan requirements eliminated not just meat and dairy, but also honey gelatin and any products processed in facilities that handled animal products. Reading labels became an exercise in biochemistry as I tried to identify hidden animal derivatives in seemingly innocent ingredients. Uncle Harold's diabetes meant calculating carbohydrate counts and glycemic indexes for every dish, while Great Aunt Rose's dental issues required pureeing or mashing foods that needed to maintain their flavors, despite complete texture changes. By the time I got home that evening, I had filled 3 pages with notes, ingredient lists, equipment needs, and cooking timelines. The project would require at least 48 hours of continuous preparation, professional-grade equipment I didn't own, and expertise I didn't possess. But the cruelest part was Derek's presence guaranteed to overshadow everything else. His successful relationship with the pie-baking Jessica would be the real centerpiece of the dinner, while I scrambled around my inadequate kitchen trying to prove I wasn't the unstable failure he had painted me as. I finally understood the true purpose of this Thanksgiving. It wasn't about family togetherness or holiday tradition. It was about spectacle. I was being set up as entertainment, a cautionary tale about what happened to women who prioritized careers over domestic skills. The family would gather to watch me struggle, fail, and finally break down under impossible pressure, while Derek and Jessica demonstrated what a proper relationship looked like. My humiliation would be complete, and public confirming every cruel stereotype about ambitious women who couldn't manage basic domestic responsibilities. I closed my laptop and looked around my tiny apartment, finally seeing the trap that had been carefully constructed around me. No reasonable person could succeed under these conditions, but failure would be presented as personal inadequacy rather than impossible circumstances. For the first time in my life, I wondered what would happen if I simply refused to participate in my own destruction. Saturday morning brought the sound of keys jingling in my apartment door, followed by my mother's voice calling out, "Surprise!" as she and my father entered without invitation. I nearly dropped my coffee mug as they bustled through my tiny space, carrying multiple shopping bags and a box labeled Thanksgiving Essentials. "What are you doing here?" I asked, still in my pajamas and completely unprepared for company. "We came to help," Sandra announced, setting down bags filled with what appeared to be decorations and table linens. "Daddy and I realized you might need some guidance to make sure everything goes smoothly." My father Robert nodded approvingly as he surveyed my apartment with the critical eye of a building inspector. "Good thing we came. This place needs serious work to handle a proper family gathering." "Mom, you can't just show up here without calling first," I protested, but Sandra was already pulling items from her bags and arranging them on my limited counter space. "Don't be silly. Family doesn't need appointments," she said, unwrapping what appeared to be an enormous cornucopia centerpiece that would take up half my dining table. "Now where do you keep your good china?" "I don't have good china. I have regular plates that I use every day." Sandra's face fell dramatically. "Cheryl, you can't serve Thanksgiving dinner on everyday dishes. What will people think?" "I think they'll think I'm a normal person who lives in a studio apartment and doesn't entertain 30 people regularly." Robert cleared his throat, a sound that had commanded attention in our household for decades. "The real issue here is planning. You need to do a practice run of the whole meal to make sure you don't embarrass yourself on Thursday." "A practice run of everything, Dad, that's an entire second Thanksgiving dinner. I can't afford to buy all those ingredients twice." Well, you should have thought of that before you volunteered to host," he replied, walking around my small space and frowning at everything he saw. "This refrigerator is too small. Where are you going to store a 20-pound turkey?" I looked at my apartment-sized refrigerator, which was already struggling to hold my normal groceries, plus the ingredients I had started buying for Thursday. A 20-pound turkey would require removing everything else. "And this stove," Sandra added, shaking her head as she examined my basic electric range. "Only 4 burners. How are you going to coordinate everything? A proper Thanksgiving requires at least 6 burners going at once." "I was planning to work in stages and use the oven for multiple dishes," I explained weakly. "Stages." Robert laughed. "Honey, you can't serve lukewarm food to guests. Everything needs to come out hot and fresh at the same time." My mother continued unpacking bags, revealing tablecloths, napkin rings, candle holders, and serving dishes that would completely overwhelm my tiny space. "I brought proper decorations since I knew you wouldn't have anything suitable." "What's wrong with my decorations?" I asked, gesturing toward the small fall display I had arranged on my bookshelf. Sandra glanced at my modest autumn leaves and miniature pumpkins with visible disdain. Oh, sweetheart, this is elementary school craft project level. We need something that shows real sophistication for the family. She began replacing my simple decorations with elaborate arrangements that looked more appropriate for a hotel lobby than a home dinner. The cornucopia alone cost more than I typically spent on groceries in a month. Now about the timeline, Robert said, pulling out a clipboard with detailed notes. You'll need to start prep work on Tuesday night. Wednesday should be dedicated to dessert preparation and vegetable chopping. Thursday morning begins at 4 a.m. with turkey prep. 4 a.m., I repeated. Of course. A 20-pound turkey needs at least 8 hours to cook properly, plus resting time. You can't just throw it in the oven and hope for the best. As they continued rearranging my apartment and criticizing my preparations, Sandra dropped the bomb that completely shattered my remaining composure. Oh, and I forgot to mention your cousin Stephanie will be documenting everything for her blog. What blog? You know her food blog, Midwest Family Traditions. She has over 50,000 followers now. Isn't that exciting? She specifically asked to cover our family Thanksgiving because she's been looking for authentic home cooking stories. My blood turned to ice water. You invited a food blogger to photograph my dinner. Well, it's Stephanie, not some stranger. She's family. And think of the exposure this could give you. If the dinner turns out well, you could become internet famous. The implication of, if the dinner turns out well, hung in the air like a threat. Stephanie's blog specialized in showcasing elaborate family meals with professional quality photography and detailed recipes. Her followers expected restaurant-level presentation and flawless execution. Mom, you didn't think to ask me about this. Why would I ask? It's wonderful publicity for our family. Stephanie is so excited to showcase a real family Thanksgiving instead of those fake magazine spreads. I realized that my potential failure would now be documented for thousands of strangers to see. Food bloggers weren't known for their kindness when reviewing amateur cooking attempts. Poor lighting, messy plating, or any cooking errors would be preserved forever in high-resolution photographs. And she's bringing professional camera equipment, Sandra continued happily. She wants to capture the whole process from prep work to family reactions. The whole process she's going to photograph me cooking. Of course, that's the authentic touch her followers love. Behind-the-scenes content showing real family dynamics. Robert nodded approvatively. It'll be good for you to have some accountability. Knowing that people are watching will motivate you to do your best work. The pressure was suffocating. Not only did I need to prepare an impossible meal for 32 people with conflicting dietary needs in an inadequate kitchen, but every mistake would be documented by a professional photographer for public consumption. What if something goes wrong? I asked weakly. Nothing will go wrong if you plan properly and follow directions, Robert said firmly. That's why we're here, to make sure you understand what's expected. They spent the next 4 hours completely reorganizing my apartment according to their vision of proper hosting. My personal decorations went into boxes, replaced by elaborate arrangements that made my space feel like a rented party venue. My comfortable furniture was rearranged to maximize seating, eliminating any cozy corners where I might retreat during the chaos. Sandra critiqued my planned menu, suggesting additions that would require equipment I didn't own and techniques I had never attempted. Robert timed my movements around the kitchen, pointing out inefficiencies in my workflow and questioning my basic cooking knowledge. By the time they left, my apartment felt like a foreign space designed for someone else's life. The elaborate decorations mocked my modest lifestyle, while their detailed timeline mocked my professional schedule. I had work deadlines that wouldn't disappear just because my family demanded domestic perfection. But the worst part was understanding that this had been the plan all along. The food blogger, the impossible requirements, the public documentation of my efforts. it was all designed to create maximum pressure and maximum opportunities for failure. I sat among the overwhelming decorations feeling like an actress who had been cast in a role she never auditioned for. The stage was set for a performance I couldn't possibly pull off, while an audience of critics waited to document every stumble. Thursday was only 5 days away, and I still had no idea how to cook for 32 people with specialized dietary needs. But now I also had to worry about looking photogenic, while doing it knowing that any failure would be preserved forever on the internet. The apartment that had once felt like my sanctuary now felt like a trap elaborately decorated and carefully staged for my inevitable humiliation. Sunday evening found me collapsed on my couch, surrounded by cooking magazines, recipe printouts, and shopping lists that seemed to grow longer every time I looked at them. My laptop displayed 17 different tabs with information about gluten-free flour, substitutes, vegan butter alternatives, and diabetic-friendly sweeteners that cost more per pound than my rent. The timeline my father had created stared back at me from my coffee table: 46 hours of continuous cooking, 17 different dishes requiring specialized preparation, and a coordination schedule that would challenge a professional catering team. My studio apartment had been transformed into a staging area that felt more like a museum exhibit than a home. I picked up my phone and called the one person who had always seen through my family's dysfunction with crystal clarity. "Maya, I need help," I said the moment she answered. "Cheryl, what's wrong? You sound terrible." "Can you come over? I'm drowning here and I don't know what to do." "I'll be right there." Maya arrived within 20 minutes carrying takeout containers from our favorite Thai restaurant and wearing the expression of someone prepared for battle. She took one look at my transformed apartment and let out a low whistle. "What happened to your place? It looks like Martha Stewart exploded in here." "My parents decided to help with Thanksgiving preparation." "Help with what Thanksgiving preparation? I thought you were working on that huge campaign launch this week." "That's the problem. They volunteered me to host Thanksgiving for 32 people without asking me first. Then they invited a food blogger to document everything. And my ex-boyfriend Derek will be there with his new fiancée who makes homemade pies." Maya set down the food and stared at me. "Run that by me again. Your parents volunteered you to host what?" I explained everything: the impossible guest list, the dietary restrictions, the 4 a.m. start time, the professional documentation, and Derek's presence as a perfect couple showcase. Maya's expression grew darker with each detail. "This is insane, Cheryl. Even a professional caterer would struggle with these requirements in a full commercial kitchen. You're being set up to fail." "I know, but I can't back out now. Everyone's counting on me, and if I disappoint them..." "If you disappoint them, what, they'll be forced to take responsibility for their own holiday plans like normal adults." Maya walked around my apartment, examining the elaborate decorations and reading through my father's timeline with increasing disgust. "How much money have you spent on this so far?" "About $2,000 for ingredients, decorations, and equipment." $2,000, Cheryl? That's almost a month's rent for you? I had to buy separate cookware for the gluten-free dishes, special ingredients for the vegan options, and professional-grade equipment to handle the volume. Maya sat down across from me and pulled an envelope from her purse. "I've been saving this for an emergency, and I think we've reached that point." She opened the envelope and pulled out a plane ticket. "Round trip to Maui, departing Tuesday night at 2 a.m. I booked it 3 months ago when I watched your family guilt you into paying for Jake's birthday party while he spent the money you gave him on his girlfriend." I stared at the ticket in shock. "You bought me a plane ticket." "I started an emergency fund after watching your family drain you emotionally and financially for years. Every time they manipulated you into taking responsibility for something that wasn't your job, I put money aside." "But I can't just abandon Thanksgiving. What will everyone think?" "What will they think? They'll think about where to order catering at the last minute. They'll think about why they put all this responsibility on one person. They'll think about how they contributed to this situation. Maya pulled out her phone and showed me photos of a beautiful resort overlooking the Pacific Ocean. I called them this morning. They had a last-minute cancellation for a suite with an ocean view, 5 days and 4 nights, all meals included spa access, and complete peace and quiet. Maya, I can't afford this. It's already paid for, and honestly, it costs less than you've spent trying to make this impossible Thanksgiving work. She leaned forward and took my hands. Cheryl, when was the last time you did something just for yourself? When was the last time you said no to an unreasonable demand from your family? I tried to remember and couldn't. Every family gathering, every holiday, every celebration somehow became my responsibility. I organized, I coordinated, I paid for things I cleaned up afterward, and I never received credit or appreciation. But what about my job? I can't just disappear during the campaign launch. Your boss already approved your vacation request. I called her this afternoon and explained that you were dealing with a family emergency and needed time to handle it properly. You called my boss. I told her you were being pressured into hosting a major family event during a crucial work period and that you needed to resolve the situation before it affected your performance. She was completely understanding and said the campaign could handle a few days without you. I felt something shifting inside my chest, a loosening of pressure I hadn't realized I was carrying. The plane leaves Tuesday night. 2 a.m. departure, which gives us tomorrow to pack and get you ready. You'll be watching the sunrise over the Pacific Ocean while your family figures out how to solve their own hosting problems. But they'll be so angry. Let them be angry. They created this mess by putting impossible expectations on you without your consent. Their anger is not your responsibility. Maya stood up and started pulling some of my mother's decorations down from their prominent positions. Besides, think about what happens if you stay. You exhaust yourself trying to meet impossible standards. Derek gets to show off his perfect relationship in your space. The food blogger documents your struggles for public consumption, and your family spends the evening criticizing everything you did wrong. When you put it like that, that's exactly what will happen, and we both know it. This isn't about Thanksgiving. This is about control. They want to remind you that no matter how successful you become professionally, you're still just the unmarried daughter who exists to serve the family's needs. She was right, and I knew it. This Thanksgiving was designed to put me in my place, to humble my independence and remind me of my proper role in the family hierarchy. What would I tell them? You tell them you're taking a mental health break to deal with stress and burnout. You apologize for any inconvenience, but explain that you need to prioritize your well-being. Maya pulled out $500 in cash and placed it next to the plane ticket. Spending money for activities, spa treatments, and anything else you want to do for yourself. I picked up the ticket and stared at the departure information. Tuesday night, just 2 days before Thanksgiving. The resort looked like paradise compared to the elaborate prison my apartment had become. I've never done anything like this before. Which is exactly why you need to do it now. You've spent 28 years being the family's emergency solution. Time to discover what happens when they have to solve their own problems. Looking around at the overwhelming decorations, impossible timeline, and evidence of my family's manipulation, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, the possibility of choice. I could continue down the path of certain failure and public humiliation, or I could choose myself for once. Maya smiled as she watched understanding dawn on my face. So what do you say? Ready for your first real vacation in 5 years? I looked at the ticket again, then at the mountain of evidence showing how thoroughly I'd been set up to fail. The answer suddenly seemed obvious. Let's start packing. Monday night found Maya and me carefully folding summer clothes into my rarely used suitcase, while my phone buzzed continuously with messages from various family members sharing last-minute Thanksgiving requests and dietary updates. Each notification felt like a chain being broken as I ignored the demands and focused on packing sundresses instead of serving platters. Don't forget sunscreen. Maya reminded me, checking items off a vacation list that felt surreal after weeks of meal planning timelines. SPF 50 for the first few days until you build up a base tan. I can't believe I'm actually doing this, I said, folding a bikini I hadn't worn since college. What if they never forgive me? Then they weren't worth keeping in the first place, Maya replied pragmatically. Real family members don't manipulate each other into impossible situations for their own entertainment. As I packed, my phone rang again. This time it was my mother, and I decided to answer one last time before my escape. Cheryl, honey, I just had the most wonderful idea, Sandra began without preamble. What if we set up a live stream of the dinner preparation for Stephanie's blog? Her followers would love to see authentic cooking in real time. My hand froze on a beach cover-up. You want to live stream me cooking? Isn't it brilliant? Stephanie says live content gets much more engagement than regular posts. We could start streaming at 4 a.m. and show the whole process. The idea of stumbling around my kitchen at dawn while thousands of strangers watched me struggle with impossible recipes felt like a special kind of torture. Mom, I don't think that's a good idea. Why not? It's perfect publicity. And if anything goes wrong, people love seeing how real families handle cooking disasters. There it was again, the barely disguised expectation that I would fail spectacularly while cameras captured every moment of my humiliation. I have to go, Mom. I'll talk to you later. Wait, I wanted to discuss the appetizer timeline. Uncle Robert mentioned that his new girlfriend is vegetarian, so we need to add another dietary restriction. I hung up and turned off my phone completely. Maya looked up from organizing my toiletries. New demands? They want to live stream the cooking process starting at 4 a.m. Of course they do, because your inevitable nervous breakdown will make great content for food blog entertainment. As we continued packing, Maya showed me screenshots she had taken of my mother's social media post about the upcoming Thanksgiving. Sandra had been building anticipation for weeks, posting about her ambitious daughter, who was finally taking on real family responsibility and learning what hosting really means. Look at the comments, Maya said, scrolling through responses from relatives and family friends. The messages were a mixture of excitement about the upcoming feast and barely concealed skepticism about my abilities. Aunt Ruth had written, "I hope she's been practicing," while Uncle Harold commented, "Can't wait to see how this turns out," with a winking emoji that felt more threatening than playful. They're all expecting me to fail, I realized. They're counting on it. This whole thing is structured like a reality show challenge designed to create drama and conflict. Maya pulled up the food blog that would be covering the event and showed me recent posts. Stephanie's Midwest Family Traditions featured elaborate holiday spreads, photographed in professional lighting, with detailed critiques of presentation technique and authenticity. Her most recent post was titled, "When Family Cooking Goes Wrong, Learning from Holiday Disasters," and included a section on red flags that indicate amateur hour. "She's not documenting a family tradition," I said, reading through the harsh reviews of other home cooks who had submitted their holiday attempts. "She's creating content by watching people fail." Exactly. And your failure will be particularly entertaining because everyone knows you're in over your head. I closed the laptop and focused on choosing shoes for walking on beaches instead of standing in kitchens. The contrast felt revolutionary. At midnight, Maya helped me write a note to leave for my parents explaining my decision. We went through several drafts before settling on something that was honest but not inflammatory. "Dear Mom and Dad, I've decided to take a mental health break and will be unavailable for Thanksgiving this year. The stress of trying to coordinate such a large event while managing my work responsibilities has become overwhelming, and I need to prioritize my well-being. I apologize for any inconvenience this may cause and suggest contacting Jake about alternative hosting arrangements since his house is much better equipped for large gatherings. I'll be back next week and look forward to discussing how we can approach future family events in a way that works better for everyone. Love, Cheryl. Perfect, Maya said, reading the final version. Calm, responsible, and completely reasonable. They're going to be furious. Let them be furious at home while you're drinking Mai Tais on the beach. As we finished packing, I found myself looking around my apartment with new eyes. The elaborate decorations my parents had installed looked ridiculous in the space-like costumes that didn't fit the character I was supposed to play. The impossible timeline mocked me from the refrigerator, but now it just looked like evidence of other people's unrealistic expectations. One more thing, Maya said, pulling out a small wrapped package. Early Christmas present. Inside was a beautiful leather journal with "Adventures Begin Here" embossed on the cover. For documenting your real experiences instead of performing fake ones for other people's entertainment. I hugged her tightly, feeling tears of gratitude and relief. For the first time in months, I was making a decision based on what I wanted rather than what other people expected from me. At 1:30 a.m., Maya drove me to O'Hare Airport. The roads were empty except for a few late-night travelers and early morning workers, giving the city a peaceful, suspended quality that matched my mental state. Last chance to change your mind, Maya said as we pulled up to the departure terminal. No way, I'm done being the family's emergency solution. I grabbed my suitcase and beach bag, feeling lighter than I had in weeks despite carrying luggage. The note for my parents sat on my kitchen counter, along with contact information for 3 different catering companies I had researched as alternative solutions. Text me when you land, Maya called as I walked toward the terminal. Thank you for everything, I called back, for seeing what I couldn't see and giving me permission to choose myself. As I checked in for my flight, I imagined my family's reaction when they discovered my note in a few hours. The anger, the panic, the scrambling to find last-minute solutions. But for the first time, those problems belonged to someone else. The gate area was nearly empty except for a few other passengers escaping their own complicated lives for simpler pleasures. I settled into a seat overlooking the runway and opened my new journal to write about this moment of choosing freedom over obligation. In 6 hours, I would be watching the sunrise over the Pacific Ocean, while my family discovered that some problems couldn't be solved by manipulating the most accommodating family member into submission. The plane began boarding, and I smiled as I joined the line of passengers heading toward paradise instead of performance anxiety. My phone, still turned off, contained dozens of missed messages I would never have to answer. For once in my life, I was exactly where I wanted to be, doing exactly what I chose to do. The feeling was intoxicating. Thursday morning found me sitting on my private balcony overlooking Wiley Beach, sipping fresh pineapple juice and watching surfers catch the early waves. The ocean stretched endlessly toward the horizon, painted in shades of turquoise and gold that made my old life feel like a black and white photograph. My phone finally turned back on, buzzed continuously with incoming messages that I read with detached amusement rather than mounting panic. The first wave of messages had arrived Wednesday morning when my parents discovered my note. My father's texts progressed from confused, "Where are you? We need to discuss the cooking schedule," to angry, "This is completely irresponsible," to desperate, "Call me immediately." My mother's messages followed a similar pattern, but with added guilt manipulation. "How could you abandon your family like this? Everyone is counting on you." But the real entertainment began Wednesday afternoon when family members started arriving to help with last-minute preparations, only to discover that there were no preparations in progress. Aunt Patricia had driven 3 hours with gluten-free ingredients, expecting to find an organized kitchen operation. Instead, she found my parents standing in an empty apartment surrounded by elaborate decorations but no food. Jake's response was the most revealing. His initial message read, "What do you mean you left? Who's supposed to cook now?" Followed quickly by, "This is so selfish. How am I supposed to figure this out?" The panic in his texts confirmed what I had always suspected. He had been counting on me to handle all the work while he received credit for family leadership. By Wednesday evening, the family group chat had exploded into chaos as various relatives offered opinions, suggestions, and blame. Uncle Harold suggested ordering from the hotel restaurant where he worked, but their Thanksgiving menu was already fully booked. Aunt Ruth recommended a grocery store that sold pre-cooked turkey dinners, but they were also sold out. The real crisis came when someone had to call Cousin Stephanie to cancel the blog coverage. Stephanie's response screenshot and shared in the family chat was professionally brutal. "I'm disappointed by this unprofessional cancellation. My followers were excited about authentic family content, and this last-minute change reflects poorly on your family's commitment to tradition." Jake eventually found a catering company that could provide basic turkey dinners for pickup, but they charged emergency rates for Thanksgiving Day service. The cost was nearly $4,000, twice what I had budgeted for homemade preparation. The irony wasn't lost on me. My family was now paying professional caterers premium rates for food that wouldn't meet any of their specialized dietary requirements. Thursday morning brought a new round of messages as the reality of their situation fully sank in. The catered food arrived in aluminum trays, with standard stuffing containing gluten-regular mashed potatoes with dairy, and nothing suitable for Emma's vegan requirements or Great Aunt Rose's soft food needs. Uncle Harold couldn't eat most of the sides due to high sodium content, and the green beans were prepared with almonds that triggered Cousin Michael's nut allergy. "This is a disaster," my mother texted. "The food is terrible and no one can eat anything. Uncle Harold brought peanut butter sandwiches because nothing else works for his diet." I responded from my beach chair where I was reading a novel I had picked up in the resort gift shop. "I'm sorry you're having difficulties. Maybe next year we can plan something more manageable for everyone." The response was swift and furious. "More manageable? This was supposed to be your responsibility. You volunteered for this." "Actually, I never volunteered. You assigned this to me and told everyone I had volunteered. There's a difference." My phone went silent for nearly an hour before Jake finally called me directly. "Cheryl, what the hell? Everyone is furious Mom is crying, and Dad is talking about disowning you. Where are you?" "I'm taking a mental health break to recover from burnout," I replied calmly, watching a sea turtle surface near the reef. "Mental health break. It's one day of cooking. How hard could it be? If it's so easy, why didn't you handle it? Your house has 3 times the kitchen space and actual dining room seating." Because you're better at this stuff, and you're the one who wanted to do it." "I never wanted to do it, Jake. Mom told everyone I volunteered because I was lonely and desperate for family connection. None of that was true." There was a long pause before Jake spoke again. "Oh, I didn't know that." "What you didn't know is that this required specialized equipment. I don't own techniques I've never learned, and about 40 hours of preparation time. What you didn't know is that Stephanie planned to document my struggles for blog content. What you didn't know is that Derek was invited specifically to show off his successful relationship while I flailed around trying to prove I'm not a failure." Another pause. "Derek is here with his fiancée. She brought pies." "How nice for them. Are they enjoying the catered turkey?" "Actually, they left early. Jessica said the food wasn't what she expected for a family gathering. I laughed despite myself. So the perfect couple couldn't handle a Thanksgiving that wasn't Instagram-worthy. How disappointing. Look, everyone's asking what to do about Christmas. Mom wants to know if you'll be back to normal by then. Define normal. Like willing to help organize things and contribute to family events. I watched a couple walk hand in hand along the beach, completely absorbed in their quiet conversation. They looked peaceful and connected, sharing something simple and authentic. I'll contribute equally to family events that are planned collaboratively and fairly distributed among all family members. What does that mean? It means I'll participate in family gatherings, but I won't be the default solution for every hosting challenge. It means if 30 people need dinner, 30 people can contribute to making it happen. But that's so complicated. More complicated than expecting one person to handle everything alone. By Thursday evening, the family dinner had deteriorated into small groups ordering pizza and eating in shifts because my tiny apartment couldn't accommodate everyone at once. Cousin Stephanie ended up posting about the Thanksgiving that never was on her blog, using the failed gathering as an example of poor family communication and unrealistic expectations. The blog post, which several relatives shared with me, actually supported my position. This disaster could have been avoided with proper planning, realistic expectations, and shared responsibility among family members. Placing the entire burden of a complex gathering on one unprepared person is a recipe for failure. Friday morning brought a different tone in the family messages. Instead of anger and blame, I started receiving apologies and admissions. Aunt Patricia wrote, "I had no idea how difficult we were making things for you. I should have offered to help instead of just adding more dietary requirements." Uncle Harold sent a thoughtful message. "Your cousin Emma told me about all the special preparation you were trying to coordinate. I never realized how complicated my diabetes requirements would be in a home kitchen. I'm sorry for adding to your stress." Even Jake sent a genuine apology. "I've been thinking about everything you said, and you're right. I got out of hosting because it seemed like too much work, then expected you to handle work I wasn't willing to do myself. That was unfair." But the most surprising message came from my father Friday afternoon. "I may have gotten carried away with the timeline and expectations. Your mother and I talked last night about how we've been treating family hosting like a performance instead of a gathering. We owe you an apology." As I sat on the beach Friday evening watching the sunset paint the sky in impossible shades of orange and pink, I realized that my escape had accomplished something I never expected. By refusing to participate in an impossible situation, I had forced my family to confront their own unrealistic expectations and unfair dynamics. The gathering they had planned as a showcase of traditional family values had revealed the dysfunction hiding beneath the surface. Without me absorbing all the stress and responsibility, they had been forced to face the consequences of poor planning and unrealistic demands. My phone buzzed with one final message of the day from Maya. "How's paradise?" I responded with a photo of my dinner fresh fish tacos eaten on the beach while watching the stars emerge over the Pacific Ocean. "Paradise is choosing peace over performance," I wrote back. For the first time in years, I had spent Thanksgiving actually giving thanks. For the courage to prioritize my well-being for a friend who saw what I couldn't see, and for the discovery that saying no to toxic situations creates space for authentic joy. The ocean waves provided a gentle soundtrack as I opened my journal to write about the gratitude that comes from choosing yourself when everyone else expects you to choose their convenience instead. Sunday afternoon found me reluctantly packing my suitcase in my beautiful hotel suite, preparing to return to Chicago and face whatever consequences awaited. 5 days of Hawaiian peace had transformed my perspective on everything from family obligations to personal boundaries, but I knew the real test would come when I stepped back into my old environment. The flight home gave me hours to process the messages I had received throughout my vacation. The family chaos had gradually settled into acceptance and even some genuine self-reflection. Jake had spent Friday researching local venues for Christmas dinner and discovered that hosting large family gatherings required either significant resources or collaborative effort. My parents had apparently spent the weekend discussing their expectations and acknowledging that they had been unfair to me for years. Maya picked me up at O'Hare with a knowing smile and updates on the continued family drama. Your mother called me twice to ask where you were and whether I thought you'd forgive them. I told her that forgiveness would depend on whether they were ready to change their behavior or just sorry they got caught being unreasonable. What did she say to that? She got very quiet and said she needed to think about some things. My apartment felt strange when I returned. Still decorated with my parents' elaborate Thanksgiving setup, but now it looked more like evidence of manipulation than holiday spirit. I spent Sunday evening removing the overwhelming decorations and returning my space to something that felt like home again. Monday morning brought a call from my father, which I answered with some trepidation. Cheryl, I'd like to come over and talk if you're willing. I owe you a real apology, and I need to say some things in person. He arrived an hour later, looking more subdued than I had ever seen him. For the first time in our relationship, he asked permission to sit down and waited for me to offer him coffee rather than assuming I would serve him. I've been thinking about Thanksgiving and how we handled everything. He began carefully. Your mother and I realized that we've been treating you like unpaid help rather than family for a long time. I waited silently, curious to see if this was genuine reflection or just damage control. We kept giving you the hardest jobs because you're competent and reliable, but we never considered whether you wanted those jobs or whether they were fair to assign to you. We just assumed you'd handle whatever we asked because you always have. Dad, it wasn't just about the difficulty. It was about being manipulated into situations where I was set up to fail for other people's entertainment. He nodded slowly. The blog coverage was Sandra's idea, and I supported it without thinking about how that would feel for you. We turned your efforts into a spectacle, and that was wrong. And Derek being invited, Robert's face reddened with embarrassment. I didn't know the full story about your breakup. Your mother said you were fine with him coming, and I didn't question it. After talking to Jake this weekend, I understand that Derek treated you badly, and having him there was cruel. We talked for nearly 2 hours, and for the first time in our relationship, my father listened more than he spoke. He acknowledged that Jake had been given advantages and protections that I had never received, and that their expectations of me were both unfair and unrealistic. What can we do to fix this? He asked finally. We can start by planning family events collaboratively instead of assigning them to whoever seems most willing to work. We can distribute hosting duties based on resources and availability rather than assumptions about gender roles. And we can stop turning family gatherings into performance opportunities. Tuesday brought an unexpected visit from Jake, who arrived with genuine humility and specific proposals for change. I've been thinking about Christmas, and I want to host it at my house this year. But I want to do it right, with everyone contributing something manageable and no one person handling everything. That sounds reasonable. I also called Derek and told him he's not welcome at family events anymore. What he did to you was wrong, and I should have stood up for you years ago instead of pretending it wasn't a big deal. The conversation with Jake revealed how much our family dynamics had shifted during my 5-day absence. My refusal to participate in an impossible situation had forced everyone to examine their own roles and assumptions. Wednesday brought the biggest surprise of all, A call from my boss offering me a promotion to senior marketing coordinator with a significant salary increase and leadership responsibilities for the campaign I had been working on. "Your work on this project has been exceptional," she explained. "The way you managed your time and priorities during a difficult family situation showed real professional maturity. We want to make sure you have the resources and recognition you deserve." The irony was perfect. By choosing my well-being over family obligations, I had demonstrated exactly the kind of leadership my company valued. The following weekend, my family gathered for an early Christmas celebration at Jake's house. The difference in atmosphere was remarkable. Instead of one person frantically trying to coordinate everything, we had a collaborative meal where everyone contributed dishes, helped with preparation, and shared cleanup responsibilities. My parents brought professionally catered appetizers instead of expecting someone to cook from scratch. Jake handled the main dishes with help from his girlfriend Jessica, who turned out to be much more down-to-earth when she wasn't competing with my supposed domestic failures. I brought desserts from my favorite bakery, guilt-free and delicious. Uncle Harold brought diabetic-friendly options that he had researched and prepared himself. Aunt Patricia handled all gluten-free requirements with equipment and ingredients she provided. Emma brought elaborate vegan dishes that she was excited to share rather than expecting others to accommodate her choices. The evening felt relaxed and authentic in a way our family gatherings never had before. People talked about their real lives instead of performing family harmony. Children played without elaborate entertainment programs. Adults helped each other instead of critiquing each other's efforts. Most surprisingly, my mother pulled me aside before leaving and offered her own genuine apology. "I've been jealous of your independence and success," she admitted quietly. "Instead of being proud of you, I kept trying to remind you that you still needed family approval. That was wrong, and I'm sorry." "Thank you for saying that. I want to do better. Your father and I both want to do better." As spring arrived, our family had settled into new patterns that felt sustainable and fair. We rotated hosting duties based on availability and resources. We planned collaboratively instead of through assignments and assumptions. We celebrated each other's successes instead of using them as opportunities for comparison or control. My promotion led to additional opportunities and recognition at work. I started leading training sessions on work-life balance and boundary setting, sharing what I had learned about the importance of saying no to unreasonable demands. Maya and I planned annual vacation traditions, starting with a return trip to Hawaii to celebrate my newfound ability to prioritize my own well-being. We called it our escape anniversary and used it to reflect on personal growth and authentic choices. The apartment I had once felt trapped in became a sanctuary where I hosted small, intimate gatherings on my own terms. Friends appreciated the relaxed atmosphere where perfection wasn't expected and contribution was welcomed rather than demanded. Looking back on that Thanksgiving morning when I boarded a plane instead of starting cooking preparations, I realized it was the moment I stopped being who other people needed me to be and started becoming who I actually was. The family crisis that felt like disaster became the catalyst for relationships based on mutual respect rather than manipulation and control. The ocean taught me that some currents are too strong to swim against, but you can choose which direction to face while floating. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for toxic family dynamics is refuse to participate until everyone is ready to create something healthier together. My Hawaiian journal now sits on my coffee table, filled with reflections on courage, boundaries, and the revolutionary act of choosing yourself when everyone else expects self-sacrifice. The final entry reads, "Paradise isn't a place you visit. It's the peace you find when you stop performing other people's expectations and start living your own authentic life." The Thanksgiving that never happened became the beginning of the life I had always wanted, but never felt permitted to claim. And that transformation was worth every moment of courage it took to board that plane. What would you do if your family expected you to handle impossible responsibilities alone? Have you ever had to choose between keeping peace and protecting your own well-being? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear about times when you've had to set difficult boundaries with people you love. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like to help others find it. Subscribe for more stories about standing up for yourself, and share it with anyone who might need to hear that choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it reminds you that you deserve relationships built on respect and consideration, not endless giving without appreciation.